Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the May 2022 edition of the Symbiota Support Group. I am Katie Pearson. I'm the data manager for the Symbiota Support Hub. I'm joined by several of my Symbiota colleagues. There's Lara, Lindsay, and Samantha are here at the moment. So say hi to them. I want to do a few announcements. We actually have kind of a lot going on right now. First of all, in the most recent reminder for the Symbiota support group, you hopefully received or saw a button with a link to a pre-support group survey. And so in the future, if you have any announcements to make, like, hey, we just got this grant, or hey, we just, did this thing, or we're looking for interns to do what have you, you can make those announcements using that link. You can also pre-ask any questions, and you can say whether you want them answered anonymously or not if you're just like super shy. So please do put all your questions in there, or if they're, a little bit more complex and you're like, I think they might need to prepare before they answer these, feel free to throw this in that survey as well. I believe the link will be the same every week, and we'll just see whether there are new responses every week. Big announcement, the Symbiota help desk email has changed. We just switched over to a new ticketing system. Don't worry, it's not going to become, robotic answers all the time. It's just helping us do some of our housekeeping. But now you can send your emails to help@symbiota.org. So it's actually kind of easier to remember now too, because it's just help@symbiota.org. And that'll shuttle it right over to the correct people, and we'll be able to make sure you get the help you need. I also wanted to plug the data portal lunch break. So the Consortium of California Herbaria, they were my original home. They have a data portal lunch break about their CCH2 portal, which is a Symbiota portal. And that happens on the first Wednesday of every month at noon. It's only a half an hour thing. It's very quick. It's very informal. So if you're interested in learning more about this week, we're talking about the collaborative georeferencing module in CCH2, which you'll hear a little bit more about today, actually, in Symbiota support group, then you can attend that meeting. And I think Lindsay's putting all these links into the chat. I also wanted to plug the Digital Data Conference. So this is an iDigBio conference that is, this year it's hosted by the Field Museum. It will be a virtual conference. It is May 23rd through 25th. Super exciting conference that you can attend and learn a lot about what other people are doing with all these digital data that we're creating. So make sure to check that out. We will be leading a workshop at the Digital Data Conference about research tools in Symbiota portals. And then last but not least, the Symbiota Support Hub will be at Spinach 2022. That's the Society for the Preservation of Natural History Collections. And that's in Edinburgh. So if you happen to be going there in person, you can drop by the iDigBio data help desk, and I might be there, or someone from iDigBio, or someone from Arctos. And there's going to be a bunch of people that are able to help you with your data. I'll be there. I'll see if I can round up a Symbiota sticker or something so that you can identify me, and feel free to hunt me out there. Okay, so your reminders, these are pretty much the same, except for remember we have our new help@symbiota.org help desk email, and then there's always the Symbiota docs. And then the recordings for the Symbiota support group are posted on our website at symbiota.org. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about crowdsourcing in a Symbiota portal. And there are many tools that you can use to crowdsource in a Symbiota portal. So I'm going to first talk about, like, what do we mean when we're talking about crowdsourcing? What are the tasks people use when they're, or think about using when they're doing crowdsourcing? And what tools do we have in the portals? So first of all, broadly, what is crowdsourcing, at least in terms of biodiversity collections? we generally think of it as involving non-scientists in the digitization and curation of biodiversity specimens, and in particular of biodiversity specimen data. So this can be volunteers, this can be things that are people that you involve in an event, this can be classes. So just pretty much a group of people or individuals that are not necessarily trained to, but still want to help with digitization and curation. I'm not going to go into detail about why we do crowdsourcing, why we do citizen science. iDigBio has some really good resources that they've developed, and also the CitSci Association has great resources as well. So go ahead and seek those out on the iDigBio website and elsewhere, and you'll be able to find tons of information about why this is beneficial, not only to complete tasks, but also because it's involving people who may not have naturally had, or may not have had a natural history background or exposure in the past. Okay, so some tasks that people will have crowdsourcers or volunteers do is data curation tasks. So that can be like small data cleaning or large data cleaning tasks. You know, you're like, oh shoot, we know that all of our states are misspelled in this certain way, or we have this type of information that needs to be moved to this field. That can often be a special project that you assign to a crowdsourcer or a volunteer. We're also talking about transcription, which generally is from images. So when you have images in a portal, you can do the data entry right there from the image. And then georeferencing is also a common task that is endeavored by crowdsourcers. So how do I leverage the power of the crowd for digitization and curation? Well, it's actually can be a little bit challenging because you have to think about the multiple levels of skill and oversight that you can provide to crowdsourcers. So I've put together this kind of tiered approach. So on the top of this pyramid, it's a smaller group of closely supervised, well-trained individuals. So very capable people that you trust with a lot of, back-end information or whatever. So that's a smaller subset of people. So they're probably going to use different tools to access your data. Then this second tier down here, this could be remote volunteers, so people that you don't supervise very closely, or they're just kind of occasional. So you're like, well, they're not really super well trained, but I still want them to be able to have maximum impact on using the time that they have. This third tier is public event participants. So I'm thinking about the worldwide engagement for digitizing biocollections event, particularly, or We Dig Bio event. And that's when you bring groups of people together and you're supervising them closely for a time, but not necessarily for a very long time. And they might have different backgrounds. And so you want to give them a certain level of access that is appropriate, and you can train them in that fairly quickly and also allow them to have maximum impact for their time too. And then this larger, broader tier is, I just called it internet volunteers. So that's anyone who doesn't come in with direct training from you. You may never meet them. I'm thinking of volunteers through things like Notes from Nature, SciStarter, Zooniverse. Zooniverse is a subset of Notes from Nature. So these are people that you may never meet, but you can put stuff on these internet provider platforms, and they can be crowdsourced as well. And I'll talk very briefly about those options too. So talking about Symbiota tools that can focus on or be applied to each of these tiers of users. First, let's talk about regular or experienced volunteers. So I would almost not call these crowdsourcers because they are your really dependable people. And so for these people who have training or are undergoing training or are closely supervised, you can obviously just give them editing access. And so this means that you are doing your editing in the portal. So this is mainly for live managed collections. But if you, you can also talk to us about a way that you could get people editing stuff in your portal if you're a snapshot and getting that information back into your home database. It can be a little bit tricky, so just talk to us if you want to work through that workflow. But if you're a live managed collection, you have the power to provide user permissions to anyone who has an account in your portal. So they can edit your records individually. Editors have the ability to print labels, to manage loans, to individually or batch georeference specimens. So anything that you can see in just the editor. Oh, I don't have any. 1 second. If I were to just open up a collection, anything that's in this data editor control panel, not the administration control panel, is what is seen by someone with editor permissions. And if you are an administrator for that collection, then you can go under manage permissions down here in the administration control panel and just give people access. So that's a good idea for things for people that you're closely supervising or you're training well. Okay, if we think about the next tier, these are people who are maybe not super closely supervised, but they are at least receiving some training from you. And I'm thinking about remote or occasional volunteers and potentially even public event participants. That's kind of the more traditional crowdsourcing. And so for them, we have the crowdsourcing module. And it's a way of providing access to anyone who has a user account in the portal without having to give them individual access to your collection. And it also provides only selective access, only to edit certain fields. They can't batch do anything. They can't print labels. They can't do things like that. So note that the crowdsourcing module is not visible in all portals. It might exist, but it might be kind of be hidden in a link somewhere. On some pages, for example, this is the Bryophyte portal. If you click on crowdsourcing, it's right there on the front page. If you want to use crowdsourcing in your portal and it is not immediately accessible on your portal, let us know. It is possible for us to activate that module, so to speak. Okay, so I'm going to approach the crowdsourcing module first from the collection manager perspective. So how would you get information into the crowdsourcing module? I'll start at my profile, occurrence management. And actually, I'm going to reel back. I'm going to start from the other direction. What does it look like to a crowdsourcer? Okay, so in the Lichen portal, I'm currently logged in with a user who has no permissions to any accounts. And so if I click the crowdsourcing module here, this is what I see. I see a scoreboard. So these are people who have the most crowdsourcing points. And down here, I see per collection, all of the specimens that are available to be crowdsourced. And the crowdsourcing module is for transcription for the most part. You can do data cleaning things through the crowdsourcing module if they need to go through the specimens one by one, but it was generally designed for transcription. So a user who's logged in can view this and can click on Open Records here. And what they will see is a list of all the specimens that need to be transcribed in this case. So I could click on one of these records and I can see the image. And from this image, I can transcribe all the data into these fields. There are a few fields that are locked for transcribers if they don't have explicit editor permissions. So anyone who just has a login. They cannot edit the scientific name, generally because that has been added through the skeletal data. And they cannot edit the catalog number either. So you'll see that this crowdsourcing module data entry form is a little bit reduced from what you're used to seeing in the occurrence table or the occurrence editor. But if you want to have all of the fields available, you can click this long form button, click the word long form, and you'll see something that looks a little bit more like the occurrence display. So that's if you wanted to put things like associated taxa and description or anything else that has not been put elsewhere. You'll see that they also have the option to use the OCR tools. And so that is a possibility for crowdsourcers. So you can do it either in the short form or the long form there. You'll notice that they also don't have the ability to add things like annotations or link duplicates or linked associations. So again, this is a much streamlined version of the data entry form. So once someone has transcribed a specimen record and they have saved the edits, then those points will go into a pending points kind of pool. And pending points, the data that is entered during the transcription by the crowdsourcer is immediately live. It's immediately what you can see on your records. So it's as if someone is just a straight editor of your portal. The pending part is mainly so that you, as a collection manager, can look at all the list of the things that have been edited, and you can approve or disapprove or reject certain edits. And I will show you that interface in a moment. Approved are ones that have been looked at by a collection manager and been checkmarked, basically. But again, they don't need to be approved for those edits to be immediately available in your collection. They already are. It's just a quick way of being able to pull back that data if you were unhappy with the transcription. Okay, so now coming at it from the collections manager perspective. Let's say that I'm a bryophyte curator and I want to put a bunch of bryophyte data into the crowdsourcing module. So to access the crowdsourcing module from the collection management perspective, you go into your administration control panel, which is again by my profile, occurrence management, the name of your collection. And the crowdsourcing module is a little bit buried here in the processing toolbox. So if you click this processing toolbox, you'll see a number of additional tools here. One of them being crowdsourcing. So I'll click crowdsourcing right here. And it looks like I don't have any records that I can add. So let's go try this in a different collection. I'm not actually going to submit anything. So I go into processing toolbox, crowdsourcing. Here we go. Okay, so to add specimens to the crowdsourcing module, they must have a processing status of unprocessed. So if I saw, oh shoot, there's only 13 available, I thought I had a lot more that I needed to transcribe. Well, you could go back into your control panel, open up your specimen records, search for the ones that you want to transcribe, and batch change their processing status to unprocessed. Then those are the ones that you could put into the crowdsourcing module. So let's just say that all of these taxa, all of Ditrichum pallidum, are untranscribed. I could say, okay, I need to search for all my scientific name equals this, display table. if I wanted to add all these to the crowdsourcing module, I'd go up to the batch editing tool. I would say I want to change the processing status from whatever it is currently. So in pending review for most of these. Oops. To unprocessed. And then I would click batch update the field and I would change those to unprocessed. Then when I would go back to my crowdsourcing module, this would increase. It would say, okay, now you have 13 plus however many I changed available to add to the queue. And then you could add those to the queue. Alternatively, if you did have a search, if you had some information in that field that you actually could search by, when you click add to queue here, you have some options for just being able to search for something right here. So if I knew that all of these specimens with this scientific name were the ones that I wanted to add, then I could select them from here. Actually, that's not an alternative. I take that back. You have to put them in, you have to give them a processing status of unprocessed before you can search for them in this criteria box. So this is like within everything that is unprocessed. Now I'm going to search for everything that is in Madagascar or everything that is Switzerland. So that explains why you don't have 1,000 different scientific names here, is because these are only the ones that have a processing status of unprocessed. Then you could say how many you wanted to add to the crowdsourcing queue, whatever it is, and then you can click add to queue. And it would, looks like there are currently none in the queue. That means none are currently needing to be crowdsourced. And 1,000 were previously added to the queue, but they're currently pending. Okay, so once to get something out of the queue, all you need to do is change its processing status from unprocessed to really anything else, and that will take it out of the queue. So if you're like, oh no, shoot, I put these all in the queue, you just change the processing status. To review things that have been crowdsourced, you will come to your crowdsourcing tab here. And then where it says pending approval, these are things that have already been transcribed by a crowdsourcer. You click review, and it will show you a big long list of all the things that need to be reviewed. You can filter according to the editor, so the person who did the crowdsourcing. And then you can review the specimen right here in the table, or you can open up that record by clicking the pencil icon so you can see the image. You can review, review, review. And then if you want to say, okay, I have looked at this specimen, it's all good, you can just check the box. And then once you're kind of done checking whichever ones you want to do, you click submit reviews. And that will set the processing status to reviewed, unless you check this box. That will turn that off. There are also some additional options. So if you wanted to say, oh man, these ones, I don't agree with those ones, you could remove any points that had previously been applied to that specimen. Or if there are some that were transcribed very poorly, you could move them back into the crowdsourcing queue. So that basically will just change their processing status to unprocessed and put them back in the queue if they need additional review or additional transcription. You can choose how many points you give. The points are kind of arbitrary. It's like 2 points per record is the default. I don't know why you would use other points. Maybe 1 point because this one was really easy and 3 points because that one was really hard. I don't know, make it up. Okay, so a couple of important points from this module, again, are to add specimens to the crowdsourcing module, they must have a processing status of unprocessed already when you go into that crowdsourcing tab. And then you can search by other criteria within that unprocessed status. You can search by taxonomy, country, state. So not all the options are available. Records are automatically removed from the crowdsourcing module if their processing status is changed from unprocessed. By default, you might have seen on the data entry page that the status auto set is set to pending review. So if someone opened up a record to transcribe it and then they saved it, this is already set to pending review so that every time someone does an entry, it will automatically take it out of the queue. It is possible for people to change that, I believe. So just heads up if people are like, oh my goodness, I'm transcribing stuff, but it's staying in the queue. I don't know why. It might be because of the status auto set. Just to reiterate, edits are instantly visible. They do not necessarily need to be reviewed or approved. So this is not a place to just direct any random person. They probably need a little bit of training. But you can review and approve so that points will be awarded if you wanted to keep score. Okay, and I'll take questions at the end. I'm going to run through these last couple of slides. There's not too many, but we have plenty of time for questions. If you want to work with some of those kind of medium term or mid-term skill users in georeferencing, there are a couple of tools that you can use. One of them is just straight in the editor. You can use the georeferencing tools that are in there. But there's a kind of a more crowdsourcing way called collaborative georeferencing, or COGI. This was developed by the geolocate folks. It's a pretty neat application. There are links here that will lead you to some documentation about how to use the COGI tools. This is also the topic of the CCH2 data portal lunch break, which will be this Wednesday if you're interested in watching that or watching the recording from that. But what it generally looks like is it's a separate application in, actually I can just bring it up right here. A separate application that looks like this. Someone can log into COGI right here using their COGI credentials. So it's not the same thing as your portal, Symbiota portal credentials. They have to be added to your COGI community for them to be able to view and georeference the specimens in the data set. But once they do have access, then they have the ability to kind of work on a specific data set that you have assigned to them or that is assigned to their community. And they can work through those georeferences straight in here without having to open up individual records. It also does not give them editing permissions to your collection in the originating Symbiota portal. So they can only basically add georeferences. But the neat thing is that if someone georeferences in COGI and you have pushed the data directly from COGI into, or sorry, directly from your Symbiota portal into COGI, then those edits or those coordinates that are created in COGI will automatically filter back to your Symbiota portal. And it's almost instantaneous. It's like you'll push the data to COGI at one time. You'll say, please georeference these 100 records. And then the crowdsourcers will do their thing in COGI. And then as soon as something is georeferenced in COGI, those coordinates show up in your portal. It's like magic. It's really nice. If you are not live in a Symbiota-based portal, you can still push data either to COGI from Symbiota, or you can just put a CSV of your data into the COGI platform and get a CSV out so that you can put it back into your other content management system. So there are options there. It's Symbiota independent technically, but has some really nice tools of working with it. As I mentioned, if you want more information about Koji, how to put data in Koji and how to get data out of Koji and just generally how it looks, we'll be talking about this at the Consortium of California Herbaria Data Portal lunch break this Wednesday. Okay, and then one last option I wanted to touch on was an option for really anyone with kind of low to medium skills. I don't recommend it for regular and experienced volunteers for a reason that I'll explain in a moment. And that is citizen science platforms. So third-party citizen science platforms such as Notes from Nature, which is a branch of Zooniverse. Notes from Nature is a platform, let me just bring it up, where you can do transcription or other data related tasks involving images right here in a browser. Anyone can access it. They don't even need a login. They don't need to register, nothing. They can just pop in, get some training from a little tutorial that you would put together, and then start transcribing. And it's a pretty slick interface. So this has been pretty popular with events. So like We Dig Bio is a common event that uses the Notes from Nature platform, but it has some nice options for help text that can involve images and some image manipulation tools. And overall, it's just kind of nice to use, especially for new users. And the reason why I don't recommend Notes from Nature or similar citizen science platforms for your advanced users is because, at least in Notes from Nature, by default, each specimen needs to be transcribed 3 times. And then there are consolidation algorithms that will find like the consensus sequence, so to speak, of whatever's in those fields. So if you have someone who you're like really confident in, you don't want them to have to transcribe the same thing many, many times, and just give them editing privileges and have them do it right in your portal. Notes from Nature does not integrate directly with Symbiota. So there are a couple of hoops you have to jump through to get your data in and to get your data out. But there are a lot of people who are doing this, so it's definitely not an insurmountable task. The project manager of Notes from Nature is Michael Denslow. He is very capable and willing to help people get data in and out of Notes from Nature. So you can reach out to Notes from Nature or to the Symbiota Support Hub, and we can help you with that. I think that there's like a certain number of expeditions that you can have free, but if you're going to have like a bajillion, then there should probably be some funds sent to Notes from Nature. I'm not exactly sure. That's something you would need to talk to with Michael. Okay, and I'm not going to go through this whole table that I have created, but this table is just kind of like a cheat sheet for, okay, what type of task do you want your crowdsourcers to do? And what experience level are you expecting your crowdsourcers to have? And so this is just reflecting the little pyramid diagram that we showed you earlier. So if you have experienced volunteers, they can use data editing or Koji. If you have kind of remote or occasional volunteers, you can use Koji or the crowdsourcing module, or you could just even kind of figure out some way of exporting data, having them clean it and then importing it back in, whatever. So feel free to take another look at this on the recording or on the slides that we'll share. And if you're trying to think of, okay, what is really good for my application of crowdsourcing? Okay, and so that's it for the demonstration portion of this Symbiota support group meeting, and I'm happy to take any questions. I think I saw one earlier. Carol Ann asks, in the Lichen portal, Balt and WIS, they have information in the crowdsourcing module, but they all looked complete. Is this because curators have not yet changed the status of the records? Let me take a look at what you're seeing, Carol Ann. Oh yeah, so there are some things I'm seeing. Let me share my screen. For certain collections, they might have information, they might have records in the crowdsourcing module that appear to be transcribed. And that could be just because they were left there from some other project. But it's also possible to use the crowdsourcing module for data cleaning tasks. So if you have someone that you don't necessarily want to give them editing privileges to your whole collection, you could still say, hey, I have a bunch of these cladonia that just need like a couple of tweaks. Could you review them and fix them all? And then you just put those in a crowdsourcing, put those in the crowdsourcing queue, and then you give that person, or you show that person where crowdsourcing module is, and they could do all those things right there. You know, if you have like a class who is working on learning digitization tasks, this is actually how I introduce students to, when I've been teaching an herbarium digitization course, I'll teach the students how to transcribe in Notes from Nature, and then I'll move them into the crowdsourcing module, and then I'll give them editing permissions so that they can get like more familiar with all the tools in the Symbiota portal. So you got some options there. Any other questions about crowdsourcing, or really anything else Symbiota support group is for any questions you might have? Sarah says, I'd give my left arm to be able to edit records from the table view instead of having to open each record, edit, save, and close. Understood. Yeah, the table display, table viewer is under development. I don't know if that's been one of the things that has been on in the queue, so to speak, but we hear you. Other questions or thoughts? All right, well, I will cease recording.